Welcome, everybody, to the Addiction 911 show. My name is Christina Rowe, and I am the publisher of Addiction 911 magazine. And I'm here with Debbie Sherrick, who is a codependency coach, and she is the editor of Addiction 911 magazine. And you can get a copy for free or download it on your app. Just go to addiction911magazine.com for the PDF version. And there's also links that you can download it on the iPhone, the iPad, Google Play, Android, and Amazon, and it's absolutely free. We produce this several times a year, and it's got some really great information. So welcome, Debbie. Thank you so much for being here again today.
Yeah, of course. I love this, and this is a great topic that we're going to talk about today. We really could do a series on this, Christina, this topic.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, well, the topic today, of course, is growing up with addicts, and I'm sure we all have experiences of either having a parent or a relative or a sibling or, somebody from, seeing addiction at a very young age and how it'll affect us going down the line. Now, Debbie, your father was an addict, right?
Yes. My father was an addict. Well, he was an alcoholic. Am I echoing a little bit in the echo?
Yeah, you may want to try put your headphones in.
Last week.
Doug, I see we've got Doug with us. Hello, Doug. How are you? I'm glad you joined us today. So yeah, that would probably be a little bit better.
Is that better now?
Yeah, that's a lot better. Great.
Okay, good. I forgot. I had them all here and I forgot to put them on. Yes, my father was an alcoholic from my whole life. I don't remember him not being an alcoholic. So yes, I grew up in an alcoholic home. I grew up in a domestic violent home. So I was very familiar with addiction growing up and the effects that it has on the family. And I think it's good for us to start out, when we talk about growing up with addicts or having addicts, how it affects us in growing up with addicts, that we just have to remind our listeners that it is a family disease. We think the addict is the only one that's sick and has the problem, but the addiction really spreads out into the whole family, and the whole family ends up being sick, and the whole family needs recovery.
And the cycle continues. Did you have any grandparents who were also addicts?
Actually, my grandfather wasn't. My father's father was not, but my father's uncles were all alcoholics. So he came from a family of addiction. Yes. Yes.
So there was a family history, which seems to be very common, where you'll see the grandpa and then you'll see, the parent and then ultimately the children. And you have four siblings total, and you're the only one who did not become an addict, right?
Well, I was the oldest. I was the hero child. I ended up being the rescuer, enabler, and the codependent one that was trying to rescue all of them, like my mom. But yes, I have three siblings that one brother got into addiction very young age, started at like age 12. Right. And ultimately, he really had a hard life of addiction with cocaine, crack, and, heroin. And he is now in recovery. He's been in recovery for several years. And I have a sister who became an alcoholic, and she's been in recovery. She just celebrated her 9th year. And then I had my sister next to me got into alcohol and drugs and meth, and she ended up 4 years ago overdosing and dying. So I just lost a sister to addiction. I lost my father actually to cirrhosis of the liver at the age of 68. He developed cirrhosis. So I'm very familiar with addiction.
Yeah, it runs in the family. For me, my late father, he died at 59, but he was in the music business. So he was surrounded by, people who did drugs and alcohol, and I can remember from the earliest age, I was born in 1968, people with long hair, like hippie type rock and rollers at the house. And I didn't know it at the time, but now I know they were, high and on pot and drinking and God knows what else.
Yeah.
I was backstage at a lot of concerts growing up, and I remember being maybe about 12 and just being backstage at a concert and seeing this girl like passing out to the floor. I didn't understand what was wrong with her, but she was on drugs. So for me, it became very normal. My dad was always, drinking was normal, in my house. Even when I was a young teenager, my dad was like, "Oh, you want beer? Here," way before the drinking age was legal. It wasn't a big deal. And I saw a lot of drugs and stuff too. So for me, it was so common that as I grew up, I didn't notice it in, as an adult and other people, which was it's really interesting because I was just so used to seeing people drink or, recreational drugs that when I owned a hair and nail salon in New Jersey as an adult, I did not realize that most of my employees were on drugs, which I don't know if I was in like denial. The manager of our salon, later on found out he was on crystal meth. He wound up going to jail and now he's been clean for many years. There was several addicts. One girl was addicted to Xanax. They were, abusing. And I was just kind of like in la la land. Like I didn't understand their irrational behavior or, the things that they would do. And I just thought, because I guess, seeing them when they partied or drank, I never saw them actually do the drugs. So to me, it didn't, no bells went off. It didn't like say, oh my God, I've got a salon full of addicts here, which later on I understood that they were. So it's interesting how that can happen. You get kind of immune to it.
Well, and that's a great sign. It's one of the signs of addiction, alcoholism and addiction, is how it overflows into your life, that your life becomes unmanageable. Your family life becomes unmanageable, your work becomes unmanageable, you miss days of work, you're late for work, your money becomes unmanageable, and everything's array in your life, and yet the addict or alcoholic wants to blame everything else because of their denial, not realizing the way their life is the way it is because of the disease of addiction.
Yeah, right. And it's not till they, become completely out of control. And I guess a lot of family members, and this probably happens to people, if you grew up with an alcoholic parent or, somebody using drugs and you were very young, you don't recognize it when you maybe will get a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend who's also an addict. And, you kind of overlook it for quite a while before your eyes are open because it's something you grew up with, right?
Yeah, it becomes the norm, and I think it's more that, you're not out there seeking an alcoholic or addict, but the behavior of an addict, that behavior in the home, when you grow up with an addict parent, for example, you grow up with a person that's very unavailable to you. They're not available emotionally because they don't have the tools and know how to do that. Their addiction is their first love. And so you get a mixed message about love. For instance, my father when he was sober, was very loving and hands-on and very family-oriented and wanted to do family trips and gather around the fireplace and pop popcorn, and Christmas we would make candy together. And so he was very close and loving when he was sober, but when he was drunk, he was a mean drunk and abusive. So I grew up with very mixed messages about love. I grew up with the belief system that love was loving sometimes and love was mean and nasty sometimes. And when you grow up like that, it becomes the norm for you. And then, me being the oldest and the hero child in the family, my whole mission in life, in my childhood and growing up, was trying to fix and rescue, my father, trying to get his approval, get his attention, get his love, and get him to stop drinking. And then also to rescue and protect my siblings, to be there to caretake my mother. I took on that role, which we call having a lost childhood. You become a little adult, very quickly when you take on that role. So therefore, those were my belief systems growing up. So we tend to then go out and seek relationships that need the same thing to repeat our childhood, and I believe try to heal our wounds. That's how we try to heal our wounds, by attracting the same type of person. So I went out and of course attracted unavailable relationships, men that weren't there, available emotionally, they weren't there physically, they were needed fixed, needed rescued. I would find relationships, I would find men who that I would fall in love with their potential. And then I would get into the role of trying to fix them and get them to meet that potential. And then, of course, men that were, verbally abusive. And I had a husband who was physically abusive, like my father. And he was relapsed and was an addict. So, we do tend to repeat our behaviors in our belief system, in our relationships, until we're able to get healthy and look at that and heal, say, wow, look what I'm doing, and take responsibility for, our childhood, how it affected us, and change those behaviors. And, when clients, a lot of times when I first start working with people, when they come and we look at their childhood and the belief systems they created growing up, a lot of times it's very hard for them to look at, what kind of messages did you get from dad in the home? What kind of messages did you get from mom in the home? Where were there things missing? Where was the pain? And because it all starts back then. And a lot of times people have a hard time looking at that, or wanting to get into the pain and sadness of that, because maybe today their parents are in recovery, or they have a good relationship today with their parents, or their parents have died and gone on, and they feel guilty, talking about how the parent was in the home when they were growing up, because they have a good relationship with them today and they don't want to go back there. But I really believe we have to go back to that. We have to go back to those roots and look at what did we not get growing up, and how did it affect us, or how did growing up with an addict and an alcoholic in the home affect you, and how is that showing up in your life today in your relationships?
That's a good point. And for me, it wasn't so much the men in my life that were addicts. I actually had, when I was a teenager, my best friend, and at the time, of course, everybody drank as a teenager. I didn't think of her as an addict, but now I look back, and she would get really nasty when she was constantly drinking. And I've lost contact with her. I haven't seen her in 30 years, but I recently heard about what she's still actually a raging alcoholic, which I never put two and two together back then. And then as an adult, I did have a good friend who, again, was an alcoholic. And I didn't see it took me a long time to realize that she was an alcoholic. I don't know why I had blinders on again. So it's interesting. Mm-hmm. It's not always, romantic relationship. Right. But my husband was not at the time when we were married, he was not abusing anything, but you could actually pick friends, or, be coworkers, or so you just, there's something in there that you're attracting, like you said, that needs to be fixed because you saw this behavior as a child.
Right. It's those personality traits, those character defects, those personality traits of addiction, tend to be kind of the same type, controllers, manipulators, can be, people that lie and aren't true. They have a lot of drama in their life. And so, yeah, it doesn't have to be, a significant other, a mate. It can be, a sibling that we're trying to rescue. It can be a friend, like you said. It can be, all that we're attracted to the behavior.
Right. And we're trying to fix them. And that was what I was thinking of in my salon. There was one young girl, and her boyfriend winded up overdosing and dying, and she worked for me. And I felt like I was her mother. I had to try to save her. And you come into that role of trying to fix everybody. And another one, I would force her into rehab. I told this girl, I'm going to fire you unless you go to rehab. And then you become into that role of the codependent and trying to fix all the addicts around you. And the only one you can fix is yourself. You can't fix other people. I just want to welcome everybody who's joined us. So we've got Ronald and Ruben and Doug and the Formula Guy and Ganja Net. So I want to say hi to everybody. And if anybody wants to jump into the seat, and if you were, if you grew up in a household with addicts, if you want to share your story, just jump into the seat and I'll approve you, and you could tell us your story as well. I think it's a very common, there's Ruben. Hi, Ruben.
Hi, Ruben.
Something that, that's just so common. And, it's interesting. Like, you wonder, where is the fine line between, let's say, alcoholism, social drinking, and actual addiction, when you see so many people, just drinking a lot, really, in this society? I guess it's to numb pain, or, like, I know I live in a development, and there's we have a pool clubhouse, and, you go there all weekend, there's people, everybody's drinking. Like, it's rare if you're not drinking. These are adults. Right. I'm sure they're just drinking for the weekend to have fun. But, it's just interesting to think how much of our society really has a problem as opposed to social drinking. Like, how do you know the difference?
Yeah. Well, an answer, I think it's Ruben who asks, isn't everyone an addict? No, not everyone's an addict. There are signs, of addiction. And we talked about earlier, one of the signs is your life becomes unmanageable. There's crisis in your life, your relationships are unmanageable, your work life's unmanageable, maybe you can't keep a job. There's just consequences. You see consequences of the drinking, maybe DUIs. And also, the difference between an addict and a social drinker is that a social drinker knows when to stop. A social drinker just doesn't need to continue on and on and on and on and on and on. And that's not their escape, as using drugs and alcohol. And, when we were talking about growing up in a home with an addict, I was talking to someone the other day who was getting in touch with that and repeating some of the feelings and behaviors that she grew up with. And we were talking about children. And I have such a passion for that because I was a child who grew up in an alcoholic home, and my siblings, and me having so many children of my own and working with people with children, that it affects the children so much. Kids need to feel safe in the home. Kids need to feel loved unconditionally. They need consistency. They need to be accepted. They need to know that mommy and daddy are there for them emotionally and physically. And so when you grow up in an alcoholic or, a home of addiction, you don't have any of those. One of the greatest things that I remember in growing up was fear. Waiting for the other shoe to drop all the time. When was dad going to get drunk again? When would the abuse start again? And so there was not a feeling of safety. There was not a feeling of that, I could dependency, like I could depend on my father to be there. I never knew, it was so up and down. And so when you grow up like that, you grow up with this anxiety feeling of fear and not feeling safe and waiting for the other shoe to drop. And, it's proven in research, medically, that is an addictive feeling, that feeling of crisis, that feeling of, drama and the adrenaline rush and the fear. That when you grow up with that all the time, things may be smooth for a while, and then all of a sudden there'll be a crisis from the alcoholic or the addict because they relapsed, or there's abuse, or there's fighting, and then things might go smooth again for a while, and then something else happens. And so we can, as adults, because we grew up so used to that, we can, as adults, create crisis in our life and look for relationships that warrant that, and we attract that because we're so used to that physical adrenal rush of crisis and waiting for the other shoe to drop. Normal consistency is not familiar to us. You know what I'm saying? It makes sense. So a lot of times, it's a subconscious thing. It's not like you go out there and say, oh, I'm going to pick someone who's going to bring a lot of crisis and drama in my life. Nobody does that consciously. But when you grow up like that all your childhood, it is familiar. Right. And so we will tend to seek out those familiar feelings because they are normal to our belief system and to our subconscious.
Wow, that's really interesting. So how does somebody, break the cycle? So you've grown up with an addict and, our addicts around you and, and now you find yourself in being codependent and you find yourself creating drama, whether it's with alcohol or just with a volatile person or somebody who's, disruptive. Is the first step, I guess, is recognizing that, right? Getting your, head out of the sand and taking the blinders off and looking at the people around you and the behavior. And because it's really hard, like I was saying before, to tell the difference between sometimes you've got, like you said, well, when things start falling apart, but aren't there a lot of people on the border of social drinking say weekend binging, and then they function all week, the functioning alcoholic or the
there's the functioning alcoholic. There's alcoholics that can, drink once a week or once a month, and they go on binge drinking. They binge. They just can't stop. And then maybe that binge drinking that weekend is a lot of things happen,
Right.
So it's, there are signs. I think it's the behavior. When you say, how do we, recognize that? How do we get out of attracting those relationships?
Right.
Usually when people first come to me about this, and I was the same, when I first, 31 years ago, went to my first therapist I went to find out how to change my husband who had relapsed with cocaine, and I wanted to know what to do to get him to stop. And because to me, he was the problem. And so we are in a lot of denial too. We don't realize our part in the relationship and that we have attracted this. And I always tell my clients, I always tell codependents, as I learned too, that we teach people how to treat us by what we allow. And so that takes the victim part out of it. That takes the, look what they're doing to me. Look how they're treating me. Oh, woe is me. And look at the mess that I'm in because of him or because of her. Or look what my son's doing to me. Look what my daughter's doing to me because of their addiction. And so the first thing is taking responsibility. She had said to me when I went in there and asked her that, she said, well, Debbie, do you realize that you're just as sick as he is? And I was just blown away by that, because I said, what do you mean? I'm not an addict. I'm home being responsible, taking care of the bills, making sure nobody, knows that he's relapsed. I was being the perfect codependent, being overly responsible, trying to protect him, the family, rescuing, enabling, and not allowing him to hit a bottom. And I had to learn that was my part. I had no boundaries. I was allowing unacceptable behavior. I wasn't speaking up for myself. And that's something that's very prominent too. And when you grow up with addiction and alcoholism, is that there's this huge white elephant in the room, the addiction, and nobody talks about it. There's a crisis. And then the next day, it's like everything's swept under the rug. No, you aren't taught to share your feelings. You aren't taught, or you don't feel safe also. So all these kids have all these emotions inside of fear and sadness and anger because of what's going on in the home, but nobody's talking about it. So therefore, you grow up and get into relationships, and there might be a problem in the relationship, or you don't know how to express yourself. You don't know how to share your feelings. You don't feel safe to share feelings because you weren't allowed to do that growing up. So that can be something, that's part of our taking responsibility. We have to look at, well, what's my part in the relationship? Why am I attracting these kind of people? And that's where we have to go back and look at, our roots and how we grew up and how we are repeating that in our relationship. So it's all about looking at us, not the addict, not the alcoholic. And even when they're in recovery, I tell clients, you need to take your hands, because one of the things we want to do is control the addict. I say you need to take your hands off of his recovery, whether he's going to meetings, whether he's meeting with his sponsor, whether he's working his steps properly, and you need to work your own program, work your own recovery, work your own steps, do what you need to do to separate yourself from the addict, because our addiction becomes them. Our addiction becomes we are obsessed with them, we want to control them, we want to rescue, we want to enable, that becomes the addiction of the codependent.
That really makes a lot of sense. Is that, you have you're putting all the blame and focus on the addict and not looking at it that this is an issue that you tracing back to childhood that you just never dealt with because you weren't allowed to express your feelings. It makes a lot of sense for a child to, because it'll be like 1 minute things that people yelling and screaming, and the next minute everybody's fine. And this pattern just goes up and down. And when you grow up in a household like that, and then you don't even know subconsciously that you're attracting people, as an adult, and that you're just recreating the entire scenario again unconsciously. So being conscious of it's probably the first step to, being able to take control of the situation and try not to implement some of the things that you said, which is really
and pain's a great motivator. Usually by the time I'm working with people, they're in a painful place. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. and they just say, I'm ready, and those are the ones that really are ready for change. They're ready to say, I need to do what I need to do for me. I can't take this anymore. What do I need to do? And it takes a lot of pain sometimes for people, especially if you grow up in a very emotionally painful home, which I did. And when you grow up with a lot of emotional pain, you learn to become a survivor in the home. You learn to get into a lot of denial, because denial protects us from pain. So you can get into a lot of denial to protect you from the pain. And when people grow up like that, I find they have a very high pain tolerance emotionally. They can take a lot of pain in a relationship, where other people who didn't grow up with a lot of pain would have, had stronger boundaries in the beginning, or saying, I'm getting out of here, I'm not taking this. But we tend to stay longer and become loyal longer in the relationships because we have a high pain tolerance emotionally. We're used to that, where we're used to taking, handling. We grew up with a lot of pain, so we know how to handle a lot of pain. And a lot of times, and this is really profound, and somebody out there probably really needs to hear this, a lot of times we think, we get confused that pain means love. That if we're really hurting for someone, we're just going through a lot of pain with them, that means we love them a lot. And love's not supposed to hurt like that. Love is not supposed to make you feel like that all the time. But if we grew up like that, we think that's normal, that pain is supposed to hurt, that we're supposed to always be working hard to get someone to change and get them to get it and get them to love us. And it becomes like a life mission, struggling, and that's not what love's really about.
It's so true. I mean, the only person who can save themselves is the person, not anyone else. The person has to be ready. I mean, the addict has to be ready, hit rock bottom, and be ready to change their life. There's nothing anyone can do if that person's not ready. And not even the best treatment center in the world can help them if they're not ready and their mind is not made up to. And that's hard for people to, especially people who, are trying to subconsciously control the situation because they couldn't control it as a child. If they grew up like you did with an alcoholic father or a parent who was addicted, then they turn around and they have a spouse now, and they couldn't save daddy, but they're going to save their husband or their boyfriend.
Yes. Well, we want to repeat our past to get it. If we didn't get it during childhood, we will continue to try to repeat it. To fix it. We always are trying to fix that pain, those wounds. And I kind of wanted to address, Ruben Neal asked the question, how do we heal at a subconscious level? And it's at that subconscious level, Ruben, that we create our belief systems. And really our belief systems are created by about the age of 7. And most of us think that we live consciously every day. And honestly, we live about 95% out of our subconscious. Because of our belief system, and our belief system is so embedded in our brain from childhood that it takes a lot of looking at our childhood, looking at what was created in our life those first 7 years. And usually what works best, what I find when I work with people is after getting to work with them after a few sessions and they build trust with me and we're talking about how they grew up, is that we start with some inner child work and asking them, what are the first 2 feelings that you remember feeling growing up? And most people will know that. My first 2 feelings in growing up, I remember from like age 4.5, the first emotion I remember feeling was fear when I saw my dad starting to be abusive to my mom and I was trying to stop it. I remember fear, and then shame. And there's always a lot of shame when you grow up in a home, a dysfunctional home. And that shame is not guilt. That shame is a feeling of not good enough. You feel like something's wrong. Something's wrong in my family unit. Something's wrong with me. And children, when things are going on in the home, and mom and dad are fighting and there's addiction or parents aren't available or kids aren't getting the love they need, what children do is they feel it's their fault. Something's wrong with me. What's wrong with me? How did I make daddy mad? Or why doesn't daddy or mommy love me? They really take that on, that something's wrong with them, and that creates shame. So let's say fear and shame were your first 2 emotions you felt growing up, those first 7 years. then when you start looking at those first two, how does that show up in my life today? Because we will continue to repeat those first two emotions in our relationships and in our life. We will continue to create situations where we feel fearful and not safe. We continue to create situations where we feel ashamed and not good enough. Maybe pick someone who doesn't love us the way we want and is not there for us emotionally and isn't there to tell us they love us. And so then we continue to repeat, I don't feel good enough, to convince us that our belief system is real. Right. But the good news is, in working through this process, and when we have the awareness of how it shows up in our life, and we start working on that, we can change our belief system, and that's the good news. You know, we can get rid of that fear, we can get rid of that shame in our life, and start changing how we see ourselves. And it always starts with us, and it's always an inside job. And, you know, that's why I named my business Inside Out Wellness, because so many of us look on the outside through relationships and religion and sex and looking good and exercise and all those things. Let me unband that better. Am I still echoing?
No. Yeah. You started echoing.
When I had this on. But anyway,
let's see if that's a little better.
We have to do the inside work.
Yeah, so for some reason you started echoing really bad.
You are too now.
I'm gonna turn
You're echoing too, Ruben. Hi, Ruben.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah.
Ruben, you're not echoing. So. Tell us about yourself and your story.
Okay, so this is really interesting because I've spent a few years doing pain and stress management therapy on myself, and then also on other people, and I really totally agree with what you were saying. About how we're, you know, what we go through and how it gets programmed within ourselves at a young age, even at a cellular level. Mm-hmm. And I think personally, you know, I feel like I certainly do have some more work to do on myself. And what I've found is, and also what I've been told is, sometimes it's hard to see those things with it. I mean, you can see in the physical world what's going on and stuff like that. I mean, but it's almost like we tend to want to hide, block, or numb that memory or pain. And so it's kind of hard for us individually to do the work on ourselves.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've been using to help me to kind of clear that at a cellular level is essential oils. But what other work can we do individually if we're not working with someone who's a little bit more keen to see those kind of habits and traits that we're demonstrating on a daily basis that might not be serving our highest self?
Well, I hate this echo.
I don't know why it's doing that. The two of us are echoing, but
yeah.
I don't know why it's doing that.
I wonder if I turn down my. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's still doing a echo. I don't know. When Ruben jumped in, our two computers went. So you know, Ruben, I'm going to X you out for a second.
Okay.
Answer your question.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see if this. Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yeah. And so Ruben can listen. I don't know. Yeah, we'll have to answer
Ruben's question.
Yes, we'll have to look into that, Christina, when we open to see why you and I are echoing. But Ruben, that's a great question. And I think there's so many beautiful modalities. And when I work with someone, we use so much. I give them a lot of homework and I give them a lot of things to do. And I believe that, I do a lot of energy work. I work a lot through the chakras with codependency. starting with our root chakra, which is your family of origin, your tribal center, your tribe that you grew up with, your family. And then we work all the way up each chakra center and each energy center to the crown chakra, which is higher consciousness, which is our goal. We want to live in higher consciousness where we're not living down here in those lower energies, which are our relationship centers. It's our past. We want to cut cords there. And, it's beautiful how the chakra centers really can relate to what we're talking about today. So some of the other things that I think work well that we can do is I love journaling. I think writing your feelings out, just like you're writing to God, writing to spirit, however you call your higher power, and getting that out. Just sitting still and feeling your emotions, and just going inward. One of the things that codependents do not do is we stay in our head a lot. We're up here worrying, analyzing, thinking, trying to figure things out. And so I work with clients on trying to go down into that solar plexus area, our feeling center, and to really identify what you're feeling, what's really going on inside here. So journaling, I think, is great, and getting alone and meditating and being still. I encourage clients to create an altar, like a place that they can go to, that it feels is like a soul gravity to them. Maybe, my place, I have my angel cards, I have crystals, I have incense, I have my Bible, I play soft music, and it's quiet. I have a favorite chair, and I like the lights dim, and that's where I go to meet spirit. That's where I go to look inward, and I have everything around me that I love. And that makes, my soul gravitates to. So I think meditation, prayer, and asking God, say, please show me myself, show me my truth, show me what I'm doing and the changes that I need to make. Because I believe that God and our angels, we all have angels and guides with us every day, and that they help us. We have helpers. There are helpers. So even though we're working by ourselves, I like to teach people that you have helpers with you that will guide you and show you, and through circumstances and through events. But I believe, too, that when we're really humble, Ruben, and we say, look, I really want to subconsciously work on myself and make these changes, that spirit will show you. It will be revealed to you. When we have a desire for something, that's the intention we're putting out into the universe. That's the energy we're putting out there. And when we have that intention and we're taking that step of faith to do that, I believe the universe matches us and comes to us and will support and equip us in helping us to make those changes. Does that help? Also, in healing is about the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual, because we are a three-part being. So I work with people, getting them healthy physically, because I'm a holistic wellness coach. So I work holistically with them physically, because I believe we have to be healthy physically, emotionally, and spiritually. We can't just be over here working on the emotions and not have a spiritual life. We can't be sick physically and be trying to get well emotionally, because our physical sickness, we're a three-part being. So I think it's important to have a balance and an action plan on what are we doing for health, what are we doing emotionally, and what are we doing spiritually. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that rings a bell a little bit. I'm the coach that I was working with, she had mentioned that I'm all left brain, the thinking part, the intellectual part, and I'm always in my head trying to figure out stuff, and I'm always reading stuff, and that was part of the work that we were doing, was getting more into the right side of the brain where your intuitive and creative abilities flow, and you're more heart-centered. And
do you spend a lot of time, Ruben, in nature, left brain, being in nature, and also finding a creative outlet will also help your intuitive side, like doing something creative to get out of your head and let your creative juices flow, whether it be painting or fixing a piece of furniture, remodeling it, or, whatever, you're drawn to with creativeness helps us, be a little more intuitive, because that's our higher self. You know, when we're creative.
Ruben, have you ever tried tapping, like EFT, emotional freedom technique?
Yeah, I've done.
Pretty good too. That helps release a lot of stuff. It's amazing how it works.
I think something very simple to remember, Ruben, too, is that when we are like that, when we're in our head too much and always reading and wanting to figure things out, that we just have to stop being so introspective. And that's when I feel when we're doing that we want it, that's still that control. We want to figure it out. We want to fix ourselves. We want to figure out what's wrong. We want to fix right now. And we want to read everything and think about it and analyze it. And so it's just part of just letting go, doing the best that you can do, doing all the modalities that are helping you heal, and then trusting God for the outcome.
Yeah. I've said it for a long time. But you know, after you said something, it just kind of clicked, because for a long time I've said that all healing is emotional healing. The emotional is also the spiritual part, the unseen. And I've seen that too, where within myself and also other people that I've helped to facilitate, where you know, you help with that emotional part, and then the physical part just changes. But yeah, with me, I mean, I used to, I haven't done that as much, where I would write music on the guitar. I would write music, and that helped a lot. And then also, I guess the physical part more, I guess I neglected that, working out and stuff like that, and being more creative. I think if I applied myself a little bit more in those areas, and it would help to, you know. Well,
exercise, a lot of our emotions, you know, I believe the mind and body are one. And so a lot of our emotions and old emotions and stuck feelings can be stuck in our body, in our soft tissue. And the Chinese, you know, call people that are sedentary and they have stuck chi, stuck energy. So exercise can be a great way of releasing emotion. You know, especially if you're dealing with anger and stress, that I will have people do a punching bag, maybe do sprinting real fast, something that's going to move that anger out of them, you know, that shifts, that just releases that chi energy, that emotional energy, because emotions are emotion, they're energy in motion. And so if we're sedentary and we're not moving in our bodies and pushing our bodies to the limit, a lot of times, you know, our emotions stay stuck in ourselves. And so exercise is very important for if you're trying to release emotion. And if you think about emotion too, our emotional part. Our emotional part of us is our mind, our thinking, our will, our self-will, and our feelings. And our spirit is different. You know, in a lot of languages, spirit and breath mean the same thing. You know, when our breath leaves our body is when our spirit leaves our body. So our spirit is really our higher consciousness. And our higher consciousness always knows what's best for us, always has the answers for us. And our spirit needs to connect with spirit. So, we are a three-part being. It's kind of like an egg. You know, an egg has a shell, a white, and a yolk, but it's an egg. You know, and we're a body, we're a soul emotionally, and then we're spirit.
Yeah. So I got to get going. It was nice to.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for coming on, because you really blessed the show, and I'm going to pray for you.
Make sure you follow us, and we'll follow you back. That goes everybody watching. You know, just hit the button, the little person next to our names, and follow us, and we'll follow you back. If you like what we're talking about, you can tell a little bird on Twitter. I see here. Well, thank you so much, Ruben. I see Addicted to Gamma. He had a question.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Ruben. Yeah.
Yeah. A second, I'm sorry. Addicted Gamma said, okay, exercise is good. It's good to ignore your emotions. And I think too, that's a good point too, is when, if we recognize that you said the mind, body, and spirit, when we have our mind is racing and we're having negative emotions, we have to realize that those are not real. Those are not get caught into them. So we just let them pass us by if possible and not believe them and recognize that's coming from the false self and that's not our real self. And I think the whole thing is being conscious of everything, of where things are coming from, if it's coming from yourself.
And I wanted to address, who is this addicted gamer saying exercise is good to ignore emotions? And I wanted to address that because that can be. And so we're talking about balance here today. We're talking about things that work to help us get healthy. I know my ex-husband who overdosed and died from heroin, when he was in recovery, he would become addicted to exercise. He was a bodybuilder, and he would exercise like 4 hours a day and have to have all these supplements and all this. And he would do that that was his new addiction. So we can become addicted to anything. We can be addicted to religion. We can become addicted to plastic surgery, So it's all about balance. People can use exercise in excess to not feel is another addiction, but exercise also is great for releasing emotion if you have balance in it. It's just part of us getting healthy.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Does anybody else have any questions, or before we wrap this up, does anybody want to jump in? We do this show every Friday. We usually do it around 11:30 a.m. So we'll be, each Friday. Next Friday, actually, I have another commitment. We won't be able to do it, but we'll be on the following Friday.
And listen, if you have any suggestions, put it in the box over there that you would like to hear on this show. If you have any topics that you would like us to address about addiction or codependency, on the show on Fridays, give us some suggestions because we'd like to talk about what you'd like to hear about.
Right. I'm just reading. Addicted Gamma said, okay, he wanted to jump in for a second. Yeah, sure. We have like about 2 more minutes if you just want to jump in for the quick question, and then we're going to wrap it up. So if you want to jump in, if you're still there, I'll approve you. Okay. There we go.
Hi, all.
Hi.
Hi. What is your name? I don't want to call you addicted. So what's your first name? Are you there? I think
yes,
we don't have a.
Hi.
Oh, you are. Okay.
Sorry, I have disabled my mic. So I was telling you, my name is Marco.
Marco. Nice to meet you, Marco.
Yes, it's a Portuguese name. So even the addicted word, as I said, it's bad. It has the negative point of the question. So I'm not addicted on gaming. No, I'm not. I'm not addicted to anything. But I don't judge who is, because someone has their own objectives. Even I love computers. I love all about tech. But even as Debbie said, their ex-husband, I think. Mm-hmm. He got the wrong way, but we can judge him. We don't know what made him go there. I know people who went to the same way, the same path, but they have troubles. They have things on their mind, as you said. I think Debbie. I can't judge her because I just watched it by 5 minutes ago. But I think you look the religious part of the whole thing you were talking about. I don't know if I'm making myself understand, because my English is very lousy. I'm sorry. As I was saying, my job is computer technician, so I always look to the understandable way of looking to things. So the scientific part does not enter on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
It wasn't really a question. It was just a point I want to clarify.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming in. And that's a whole other issue you said with gamer. I thought it was gamer, but people gaming get very addicted as well. And I'm sure in your industry, you see a lot of people with computers and focusing on that. And, you could, like Debbie said, you can get addicted to anything. So
yes,
thank you so much. I'm going to actually now end this because we've been on for about almost an hour. So thank you, Marco. Wonderful meeting you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Hope you'll join us again.
And I just wanted to say to everybody, our magazine, addiction911magazine.com. If you go there, you can download it. It's absolutely free. Just put your name and email. We'll send you the PDF of the magazine. Our new issue will be coming out for fall and winter soon. We have a lot of great articles. It's also an app. If you go to the Apple Store for your iPhone, for your iPad, on Android, we're in the Google Play, and we're also on Amazon for Kindle Fire. So, it's 100% free. You just, we have 2 issues already that we've done already, and we're going on our 3rd. And we really give some really great articles about addiction in there. We have a lot of great contributors. We have podcasts. We have different things that you can, listen to and get help, and a resource section that's really great as well. And we'll be doing the show, on Fridays, the Addiction 911 show. And if you have any, like Debbie said, if you, let us know if you have any topics that you want us to cover. Today's topic was growing up with addicts and how that affects us and what we can do as adults to heal from that and not attract the same but sort of relationships in your adult life. So thank you so much, Debbie. It was wonderful. Debbie's fantastic. She's the real expert here with codependency and addiction. And we want to thank you all, everybody. Jonathan, David, Marco, Ruben, Cynthia. Thank you guys so much. Ronald and Doug. Please follow us. Definitely follow us, and we'll follow you back, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye. Take care. We'll see you soon.